For 300 years, humanity had been the gentle giant of the galaxy. While other species built weapons and conquered worlds, humans built schools. While other empires measured power and destroyed planets, humans measured success and translated books and shared music. The galactic conquered had expected monsters when they first met humanity. Every species that reached the stars eventually showed its teeth. That was the rule of the universe. Power corrupted, technology enabled destruction. It was simply how things worked. But humans broke the rule. Their first contact ship carried no weapons. Instead, it carried musicians, poets, and translators. The human captain had learned 3 alien languages before the meeting and brought gifts of earth art, wine from ancient vineyards, books of poetry, recordings of symphonies that made alien listeners weep without understanding why. The galaxy did not know what to do with such a species. Over the centuries, humanity became the great peacemaker. When 2 empires threatened war, they called the humans. When ancient enemies needed to talk, humans provided the table. They established cultural exchange programs on 100 worlds. They translated literature between species that had never spoken. They sent artists on their warships because they believed beauty could prevent violence. Many species thought the humans were fools. Kind fools, perhaps. Useful fools, certainly, but fools nonetheless. Ambassador Elena Vasquez was the greatest of these fools. She stood 5 feet tall with gray hair and warm brown eyes. She spoke 9 alien languages fluently. She had memorized the founding stories of 12 different civilizations. In her 40 years of service, she had stopped 17 wars with nothing but words and patience. Elena believed in humanity's mission with her whole heart. She believed that kindness was stronger than cruelty. She believed that culture bridged any gap. She believed that if humans showed enough grace, the universe would eventually learn to be graceful too. She was stationed on Harvest Colony when her beliefs were tested. Harvest was a farming world on the edge of human space. It had no military value, no strategic importance. It was simply a place where 2.3 million humans had chosen to live peaceful lives. Farmers worked the fields, teachers filled the schools, families raised children under an orange sky. The colony's only notable feature was its library. Elena had helped build it herself. It contained books from Earth and dozens of alien worlds. Farmers would come in after work to read poetry from species they would never meet. Children learned that the universe was vast and wonderful and full of stories worth knowing. Elena loved that library more than anything she had ever built. The Kreth Dominion had watched humanity for decades. The Kreth were conquerors. They had built their empire on fear and violence. They understood only one language, strength, and when they looked at humanity, they saw weakness. They saw a species that had voluntarily dismantled its greatest weapons. They saw a people who had converted battleships into cargo vessels. They saw diplomats who brought poetry to negotiations instead of threats. The Kreth saw prey. Their war council made the decision in secret. They would not attack Earth directly. That might unite the galaxy against them. Instead, they would strike a soft target. They would show the universe what happened to species that chose culture over power. They chose Harvest Colony. The attack came without warning on a quiet morning. Elena was in the library when the first explosions shook the building. She ran outside and saw Kreth warships filling the sky like a swarm of metal insects. Landing craft were already touching down in the fields. The colony had no weapons, no soldiers. The humans had believed they did not need such things. Elena tried to contact Earth. She tried to reach the galactic Concord, but the Kreth had jammed all communications. Harvest Colony was alone. The massacre lasted 4 hours. The Kreth soldiers moved through the colony with terrible efficiency. They killed farmers in their fields. They killed teachers in their schools. They killed families in their homes. They made no distinction between adults and children. They took no prisoners. Elena gathered survivors in the library. Perhaps 200 people, huddled among the books while the world burned outside. She tried to keep them calm. She told them help would come. She told them humanity would not abandon them. She did not believe her own words. When the Kreth finally reached the library, Elena made a choice. She could hide. She could beg. She could try to negotiate, though she knew the Kreth had no interest in negotiation. Instead, she chose to be human until the very end. She walked to the library's main hall. The shelves were burning around her. Smoke filled the air. Through the broken windows, she could see Kreth soldiers approaching. Elena picked up a book from the floor. It was a collection of Earth poetry. its cover singed but still readable. She opened it to a random page and began to read aloud. Her voice was steady. Her hands did not shake. She read about love and loss and the beauty of existence. She read about humanity's hope for a better universe. She read about kindness as a choice, not a weakness. The Kreth soldiers entered the library. They saw a small, gray-haired woman standing among burning books, reading poetry as if she had all the time in the world. They did not understand. They could not understand. Elena finished her stanza. She looked up at the soldiers with eyes full of sadness but no fear. She had spent her life believing that culture could save humanity. She still believed it, even now. The soldiers raised their weapons. In her final moment, Elena Vasquez smiled. Not at them. At the words she had just read. At the species she had served. At the belief that kindness mattered, even when it cost everything. The Kreth killed her. They killed the survivors hiding in the back rooms. They burned the library to ash. Then they left. They left behind recording devices. They wanted the galaxy to see what they had done. They wanted every species to understand the price of weakness. The recordings reached Earth 6 hours later. Humanity watched in silence as Harvest Colony died. They saw the farmers cut down. They saw the children murdered. They saw their great library burn. And they saw Elena Vasquez. They saw her stand among the flames and read poetry to her killers. They saw her smile at the end. They heard her final words. Though the audio was poor and broken, something about choice and kindness and what it meant to be human, the galaxy expected humanity to weep. They expected protests and diplomatic complaints. They expected the poets to write sad verses and the musicians to compose mournful songs. They did not expect the silence. For 3 weeks, no human ship left port. No human ambassador answered calls. The cultural exchanges stopped. The translation programs went dark. Humanity retreated into itself and said nothing. In the halls of the Galactic Concord, the Kreth ambassador laughed openly. He declared that the humans had finally learned their place. He announced plans to strike more human colonies. He invited other species to join in the conquest of such an obviously weak civilization. The other species said nothing. They watched. They waited. Something was happening inside human space, something no one could see clearly. But those who lived closest to the border reported strange things. Shipyards that had been dormant for centuries suddenly activated. Archives that had been sealed since humanity's peaceful revolution were being opened. Old men and women who had once been warriors, before the era of kindness, were being summoned to meetings. The humans were remembering something they had deliberately forgotten, something that would change everything. The silence from human space lasted exactly 21 days. In those 21 days, the galaxy told itself many stories about what was happening. The optimists said humanity was mourning. They would emerge with sad eyes and gentle words, ready to forgive. The pessimists said humanity was broken. They would emerge as beggars, seeking protection from stronger species. The Kreth said humanity was dying of shame. They would emerge as slaves, finally understanding their place in the universe. None of them were right. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in bunkers that had not been opened for 3 centuries, lights flickered on for the first time in generations. Dust covered everything. The air was stale and cold, but the machines still worked. They had been built to last forever, or close enough. Admiral Marcus Stone walked through these forgotten halls with a heavy heart. He was 73 years old. He had spent his entire career converting weapons into tools of peace. He had personally overseen the transformation of 17 battleships into university vessels. He had written papers about how humanity had evolved beyond violence. He had believed every word. Now he walked past sealed containers labeled with names that made his stomach turn. Sunbreaker silence protocol. The long night, species termination device. These were not weapons of war. War implied rules, limits, the possibility of surrender. These were weapons of extinction. Humanity had built them centuries ago. During the dark years before the peaceful revolution, they had built them because they were very, very good at destruction, better than any species the galaxy had ever produced. When humans committed to violence, they did not stop until nothing remained. The peaceful revolution had not happened because humans grew weak. It had happened because humans looked at what they were capable of and felt horror. They had sealed these weapons away. They had forbidden the knowledge of their construction. They had rewritten their entire civilization around kindness because they were terrified of what they might become if they did not. Admiral Stone stopped before a massive vault door. Behind it lay the complete archives of human military science from the Dark Years, weapons that could crack planets, strategies that could exterminate species, technology that made the Kreth's greatest weapons look like children's toys. He placed his hand on the scanner. It read his DNA, his brain patterns, his emotional state. A voice from 300 years ago spoke. Authorization required from United Earth. Council warning: contents of this vault were sealed by unanimous vote of humanity. Opening requires proof of existential threat. Stone thought about Harvest Colony. He thought about 2.3 million dead. He thought about Elena Vasquez reading poetry to her killers. The Kreth Dominion has declared war on human civilization, he said. They have massacred a civilian colony. They have announced plans to continue. They do not seek negotiation. They seek our destruction. The vault considered his words. Then it asked a question that made Stone's blood run cold. Do you authorize the use of contents against the Kreth Dominion, understanding that such use may result in complete species termination? Stone closed his eyes. He remembered his grandfather's stories about the Dark Years, the things humanity had done before they chose kindness, the planets that no longer existed because humans had decided they should not exist. Not yet, he said. I authorize recovery and preparation only. Final authorization will require council vote. The vault door opened. Cold air rushed out, carrying the smell of ancient machinery and forgotten nightmares. 3 days later, Admiral Stone stood before the United Earth Council. The council chamber was silent. Every seat was filled. Representatives from every human world watched through screens. This was not a normal session. This was the most important decision humanity had made in 300 years. Stone activated the holographic display. Images filled the chamber. Ships unlike anything the modern era had seen. Weapons that bent the laws of physics. Strategies that read like horror stories. For 3 centuries, Stone said, we chose to be kind. We looked at what we were capable of, and we decided to be better. We sealed away our weapons. We forgot our strategies. We converted our warships into schools. He paused. Every eye was on him. We did this because we wanted to believe the universe was good. We wanted to show other species that there was another way. We wanted to prove that kindness was strength. He changed the display. Harvest Colony appeared. The dead, the burning library. Elena Vasquez's final moments. We were wrong. The chamber remained silent. Stone could see tears on many faces. He could see rage on others. He could see fear on some. The universe is not kind, Stone continued. It never was. We knew this once before we chose to forget. We knew that some species only understand one language. We knew that some enemies cannot be reasoned with. We knew that kindness without strength is just an invitation for cruelty. He deactivated the display. The Kreth believe they have taught us helplessness. They believe our culture made us weak. They are preparing to attack more colonies. They have invited other species to join in our destruction. Stone looked across the chamber at his fellow humans. Leaders, scientists, teachers, artists, people who had dedicated their lives to peace. I am not asking you to become monsters, he said. I am asking you to remember that we can be monsters if we must. I am asking you to authorize the recovery of our sealed archives. I'm asking you to rebuild our fleet, not for revenge. Revenge is emotional, and what I am proposing is not emotional. He straightened his spine. I am asking you to show the Kreth and the galaxy what happens when humanity stops, choosing to be kind, not because we want to, but because they have left us no other choice. The vote was unanimous. Within hours, shipyards across human space roared back to life. Factories that had not produced weapons in centuries began working around the clock. Scientists who had studied only peace opened forbidden archives and began remembering old lessons. The galaxy noticed. Of course they noticed. Human space had been quiet for 3 weeks, and now it burned with activity. Ships were being built. Weapons were being forged. Something was awakening that had slept for 300 years. The Kreth noticed too. But they were not worried. They had seen humanity's modern fleet, cargo ships and university vessels. Nothing that could threaten the Dominion. They did not understand that modern humanity had deliberately forgotten how to fight. They did not understand that the old humanity had been something very different. They would learn. On the 21st day after Harvest Colony, humanity broke its silence. A single message was broadcast across every communication channel in the galaxy. It reached every species, every world, every ship. It was not encrypted. It was not hidden. Humanity wanted everyone to hear. The message was simple. It contained no threats, no demands, no anger. It simply said, "We remember now." 3 words. That was all. But across the galaxy, the oldest species felt something they had not felt in millennia, something ancient and primal, a fear that went beyond logic or reason. They remembered the stories. The old stories from before humanity chose kindness. Stories about a species that had nearly destroyed itself with its own capacity for violence. Stories about weapons that could unmake stars. Stories about a rage so cold and patient that it could wait centuries for satisfaction. The old species began to quietly move their assets away from Kreth space. They knew what was coming. The Kreth did not. The Kreth Dominion controlled 47 star systems. Their empire had grown through fear and violence for 4,000 years. They had conquered 12 species. They had destroyed 3 others completely. Their military was the terror of their region of space. They were not afraid of humanity. Commander. Thex of the Kreth Third Fleet received reports of the human activity with amusement. Yes, the humans were building ships. Yes, they were forging weapons. But the commander had studied human history. He knew their peaceful revolution had destroyed their military knowledge. They would have to learn warfare from scratch. It would take them decades to become a threat. By then, the Kreth would control all of human space. Commander Thex ordered his fleet to advance on the next human colony. They never arrived. The fleet of 97 warships entered, a region of space known as the Hollow March. It was empty space, between star systems. Nothing should have been there. The fleet vanished. No distress calls, no battle reports, no debris. 97 warships carrying 18,000 Kreth. Soldiers simply ceased to exist. The Dominion sent scouts to investigate. The scouts vanished too. They sent a second fleet, larger than the first. This one traveled a different route. They were careful. They watched their sensors with paranoid attention. It did not matter. The second fleet made it further than the first. They actually saw something before they died. Just glimpses on their sensors. Shapes that moved too fast to track. Weapon signatures that their computers could not identify. And then silence. One damaged ship managed to escape. Its crew was dead from radiation exposure, but its recording devices still functioned. The Kreth High Command watched the footage with growing unease. The human ships looked nothing like the cargo vessels and university boats the galaxy knew. These were predators, sleek and dark and bristling with weapons that seemed to bend space around them. They moved with a coordination that suggested a single controlling mind. They struck from angles that should have been impossible, and they showed no mercy. The recording showed Kreth ships trying to surrender. White flags, open communications, offers of negotiation. The human ships destroyed them anyway. Not with anger, not with passion, with the cold efficiency of a machine completing a task. The Kreth High Command realized they had made a terrible mistake, but it was far too late. Across the galaxy, other species watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. The peaceful humans, the poets and diplomats had become something else entirely. Reports came in from Kreth space daily, each one more disturbing than the last. Human ships appeared without warning and vanished without trace. Kreth military installations were destroyed with surgical precision. Supply lines were cut. Communication networks were shattered. The Dominion's mighty empire was being dismantled piece by piece, and they could not even find an enemy to fight. The Galactic Concord called an emergency session. Every species sent observers. They needed to understand what was happening. Ambassador Yen of the Veth Collective had known humanity for 2 centuries. She had studied at their universities. She had danced at their celebrations. She had considered them friends. She did not recognize what she saw now. Human space was dark. The communication channels that had once broadcast art and music and poetry were silent. The cultural exchange programs had been replaced with military logistics. The smiling diplomats had been replaced with cold-eyed officers who spoke in clipped sentences and revealed nothing. Ambassador Yen requested a meeting with the human delegation. After 3 days, she was granted one. Admiral Stone received her in a bare room with metal walls. No art, no music, no comfortable chairs, just a table and 2 seats and harsh lighting. Yen had known Stone before the massacre. He had been a gentle man who loved music and laughed easily. The man before her now had eyes like chips of ice. "We need to understand what is happening," Yen said. The Krill are being destroyed. Their fleets are vanishing. Their worlds are going dark. This is not